Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. This is our first annual Profiles in Excellence with the Security Information Security Officers. We're talking about priorities right now, and I'd like to send it over to General Easley. I know there must be an incredible amount of priorities in the Army. You certainly talked about the cloud journey you're on. Give us your top three priorities that are you're going to be rolling out over the next 1 or 2 years that you're focusing your attention on.
Excellent, and thanks for the opportunity. In the Army, one of the key areas that we're trying to speed and improve our workforce is in the risk management framework, and how do we accelerate and automate our authority to operate. So there's the federal government has a fairly structured methodology to approve systems that we put onto our network, to make sure that they're approved, that we understand what they're doing, that we know what data is being generated by them and what we're doing and how we're protecting them. Finding ways to make that system faster and more secure is critical for our systems. One way we're doing that is to really focus, kind of setting the foundation in the prepare step of that process. So we know what are we trying to protect, and then how are we going to protect it throughout its life cycle. So we see continuous monitoring as one of that key factors of how do we instrument these systems, how do we upskill our workforce to really look at what's going on in those systems, as other panels have talked about. How do we know what normal looks like? So we have kind of that baseline, so we can use artificial intelligence and machine learning to see the deviations from that normal point. Another key piece is our identity, credential, and access management piece. There's a big push within the Department of Defense over the last year or two to really establish an enterprise approach for that, for both the services and the Department of Defense at the whole. We all get our identity from kind of a high level system that a lot of the federal government is sharing. So our identity credentials are work not just within the Army, but also across the DoD and even into the federal space. But we have to get that beyond just on our traditional endpoints. And how do we use that same identity management solution to work in our legacy databases? How do we get it to work in our cloud environment so I can move either physically or virtually throughout the system and have our identity follow us there, and we can again trust our systems. And then finally, again, it was a number of us talked about is our workforce. We've been going through a zero-based review as the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 required all the services to do. So we've spent a lot of time, a lot of introspection over the last 6 months, looking at our workforce, looking at our software developers, our machine learning folks, our cloud technicians, all these kind of different aspects of our cyber IT and our cybersecurity workforce. And how do we want to kind of upskill, find gaps, find the roles of our Department of Army civilians, of our soldiers, and contracting workforce that's going to really help create the cybersecurity solutions that we need.
Really focusing attention on that workforce, so important in the future workforce, right? What does the workforce need to be in the future based on all the signaling that's going on here? Brian, how about at Okta? Give us your top 1 or 2 priorities for this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as Major General Easley was mentioning about identity and credential, the ICAM solutions, one of our big priorities, of course, at Okta being an identity as a service provider, is really to continue, providing and establishing this identity platform to be really that key pillar, identity pillar, or critical aspect of our customers' security architectures, and as well as part of that, we're increasing investments in things such as FedRAMP High and the DoD impact levels. In fact, the Air Force is our sponsor for our impact level 4. We have our provisional authority to operate, and we're working with the Air Force A1 as our mission owner, really going through and raising our level of security so that our customers have, confidence in that we can provide this kind of essential piece of their security infrastructure. Those are really kind of the 2 key things, right, that we're focused on today is continuing to invest, providing that ICAM solution for our customers in order to give them that kind of speed and agility, so they're not having to invest or build out this ICAM infrastructure on their own are really the key things, Luke.
Right, and that IL45, a high in FedRAMP environment, super important as we all move into this this cloud journey. Well, I want to ask both Wanda and the general. You talked about these priorities. What's your top challenge in implementing those? Right, what's the biggest barrier? Is it funding? Is it just general resources? Is it the skill set? I know it's sort of all of the above, but maybe there's other things: policy, governance. There's lots of things. What would you pick as sort of your top thing that you're working on to make sure you can enable those priorities? Wanda, let me start with you.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple important challenges, but I would also say the top one is probably policy. What we recognized as we went into telework, because of COVID, is we had a lot of policies that were outdated. And in order to pivot as quick as we did, we had to address some basic, policies that probably, if we didn't have COVID, would have still been in place. We pivoted so fast and broke down, barriers with policy, working across OSD and DoD and with the other services on, how can we ensure that as we maneuver in this new environment, that we have policies that represent the current state of affairs from internal and external pressures. And so policies, continue to be something I want to work on. Processes, automation, but you got to understand your process. You got to understand where your challenges are with your processes, and then reinvigorate them, and then automate, because we don't want to automate bad processes. So policy and process, and then top that off with talent.
Okay, yeah, really important, super critical areas. I saw, with all due respect to my good friends over at OMB, this telework policy that was coming out. I said the telework policy is everyone's doing it, right? That's the policy. General Easley, let me ask you, top barrier, top challenge as you go on this journey to secure your environment, move to the cloud, et cetera.
I concur with Wanda. I mean, a lot of our current issues is just policy. We have not given enough guidance in a lot of areas. We will tell our acquisition community that they need to go follow a NIST standard, or they need to develop a cybersecurity strategy, but we don't give them, say, well, you really need to do this to enable some capability, so we can see it, better visibility of these assets, or that we can defend the assets better. We see standardization is a key part of that, so that the network infrastructure, the data, both from just the operational data and the cybersecurity data, is coming off of our, again, hundreds of thousands of endpoints in a consistent manner, so it can get put into our data platforms, and our cyber defenders can then manage that in a coherent environment. Right now, our cyber defenders, when we have a breach, when we have an incident, they have to go in and do a lot of cyber surveillance just to start doing their job, and that's expensive and it's time consuming. Having these better standardizations where we know what each of one of these thousands of camps, posts, and stations looks like, so that when there is an incident, as our other panelist says, we can react faster. We in fact react at machine speed and not necessarily at human speed.
Very important. Well, we're going to wrap it up with this last question that we like to end and close out with. And I'm going to start with you, Chris. The question is around, what does it look like 2 to 3 years from now, right? What's the demand signals that you're seeing out there? What's maybe out of the petri dish, but not in full production in regards to Quest?
Sure. So the obvious thing that we often overlooked comes back to the last question around challenges, and Wanda hit on the head. Is like process, policy are very important, and I like to put them into 3 buckets: people, process, and platforms. As a technology provider, all the investments we're making, both tactically for the current environment and strategically for the future, are based on process and improving processes and platforms. And those are technical areas that we excel in. The part that we have trouble with, and the part that we probably will have to invest in both from a company organization as well as a sales and a customer relationship standpoint, is the people side of things. It's very easy to bring technology into an environment. It's very difficult to get people to adapt and incorporate that technology into their workflows. So a lot of things we're working on, quite frankly, are around automation in our tools, a lot of automation. And it comes back to something we talked about earlier, that's confidence in the data. If you're going to automate something, like Wanda said, you can't have a bad process. If you automate a bad process, you just make things infinitely worse. I mean, what it says, to err is divine, but to err significantly requires a computer. I forgot the exact quote is, but you now look at the way we are doing our platforms and our processes, and how we automate them is going to be very critical. So a lot of investment is around that, basically automation with delivering a system that our customers will be satisfied with, to the point where the people side of things will be easier. So when the general and Wanda go into an environment, says like, hey, this is what we're going to do, it's as easy as flipping a light switch. And that's where we have to get IT to. We talked about incident response and doing a lot of data collection around an incident, and how much time it takes. The more investment we make around making that process easier for our end users, and that's what this comes down to: how our end users respond, how they react, and how they can have confidence in the systems that we're giving them, is where a lot of our R&D actually goes into. So while it's easy to craft systems and build them in a laboratory, we now have to figure out exactly what's the best way to get those into the hands of actual people and make them comfortable with those new processes and confident in the platform and the underlying data structures that are supporting the things we're bringing to market.
Confidence, very key. Brian, how about at Okta? What's it going to look like a couple of years from now?
Yeah, no, Luke, I think the way that we're seeing kind of the identity landscape that Okta plays in shaping out over the next couple of years is folks really, agencies really looking at identity with a wider spectrum view of this, right? Currently, I think that we tend to pigeonhole identity into, say in the network area, or in the applications that you're deploying. We're only worrying about identity in those silos, and really I see that our agencies and our customers are really realizing that identity affects such a pivotal aspect of all access, and whether it's your citizens coming, your citizens or customers coming in and accessing and providing services through citizen engagement or citizens applications, ensuring that is a secure and modern experience for your customers, as well as for your employees, right? That your contractors or employees, as they're coming in, really it's can they safely use, whether it's a networking piece of equipment where they're doing software defined networks or software defined perimeters, or whether it's just accessing a productivity application, right? Being able to secure that and provide that pivotal piece, provide friction where needed, ensure that the right person has the right access to the right information at the right time from the right device all the way through, is really a critical aspect that I think we're going to get to. And I think that's, establishing kind of identity as one of those primary cloud capabilities, right? Identity as a service doesn't, as you think of like platform as a service and, infrastructure as a service, I think our vision is that you're going to start to think of as identity as a service, right? As an underlying service that provides all those capabilities across the spectrum of access.
Identity really key. They talk about data as the new oil, and certainly identity is right there with it. Jim, how about at Fortinet? What can we expect over the next couple of years?
So Luke, it's all about convergence. It's the convergence of networking and security. To build on Brian's point, what we need to do is enable and secure connections between users, data, and compute resources, regardless of the location of any of the three. It's not a conversation about, am I in the cloud? Am I on premise? Am I doing edge computing? It truly should not matter. It should be about saying you need the data on demand. You need it to be secure. We did work from the office. We did work from home. Now it's work from anywhere, or for my DoD colleagues, it's be prepared to fight from anywhere, which they've always had to do, but in an increasingly digital fashion. So genuinely, it's about saying security and networking are increasingly going to be inseparable. We got to break down that I'm going to make an IT decision, and then I'm going to figure out how to secure it. The two, as we saw during COVID, when we supported that pivot to remote telework, it succeeded because we provided the capabilities in a fashion that was secure. That's the future. It's about enabling these connections, and I no longer care about location for any of the assets involved in that transaction.
Right. Very, very key aspects of locking this stuff down and doing it in a fused manner. Major General Easley, if I'm coming out of the academy or I'm coming out of boot camp and a freshly minted officer or a soldier, and I look around in 2 years, what can I expect to see? Is somebody going to hand me a laptop and say, go fight the good fight? Or what are we going to see?
Well, great lead in. And I'm going to tie this to Jim's concept of convergence. We have so many organizational networks right now in the Army where we're collapsing those and bringing them into a true enterprise system. And not only are we doing that at kind of the traditional IT system, we're going to have to create that infrastructure to work around the globe, that will work on our tactical networks, that will work on host nation networks, and will work in people's houses. So it goes to your laptop, Luke. I want to be able to take my laptop and trust that it has access to Army systems wherever it is in the world, and that I don't have to change its security posture, because I know if I'm using a host nation infrastructure, or if I'm using my home infrastructure, that I can trust the data that I'm generating. I can trust that network access that I'm getting. That's really, we know we have to get there for our Army. We have to get it for our traditional IT systems, and we even have to get it for some of our weapon systems as well. We want our soldiers on the battlefield to be tied to the network, so they can get that situational awareness information that they need, so that they can get that real-time feed of, this is where your next logistics drop is, or this is where your next movement is, or this is where we think the enemy is. Using this broader digital ecosystem to fight our wars is a critical change that the Army is migrating to over the next few years.
Every soldier deserves to be enabled, and they certainly are, and they'll get so even more so in the future, and feel confident about that enablement and the information that they're getting. Well, as we wrap it up here, Wanda, we're going to ask you to take us home, and who better to talk about the future than the CISO at the Air Force? Tell us what it's going to, what do you envision the environment's going to look like in a couple of years? You got a lot of things going on there. What do you expect to see?
Similar to, what Matt mentioned, at the end of the day, it's about the warfighter and ensuring they have access at the tactical edge, and that they understand that the data is secure. So when decisions are made, they are comfortable that cybersecurity is in place. The data is, there and available. And also, from a supply chain perspective, being able to procure and develop systems and capabilities, knowing that from end to end that cybersecurity is there. And lastly, responding and recovery efforts. If we are attacked from an adversary, that we are able to pivot and recover and respond appropriately. And to do that, you must have cybersecurity as the baseline. I am comfortable that cybersecurity is now maturing enough to where we are in the conversations early and often. We are enabling the mission to go forward in a great fashion. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a lot of great things that the department is working with our partners there with the Army, as well as the Navy and our partners in industry.
Well, thank you very much. And that's going to wrap it up for us. I'd like to thank all of you for your service, for fighting the good fight every day, for all the partners that help us make this environment secure and enable these capabilities. I'd like to thank the sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.